Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with Amy Sargent-Kossoff, who is the Executive Director of the Institute for Social and Emotional Intelligence. But in addition to that, she's also a fellow full-time RVer. So I'm really excited to have her on the show. We've connected through a mutual connection, Bobby Kaler, who we've both been on Bobby's show. And when I heard the episode with Amy, I was like, I got to connect with her, and found out through that process that she was a full-time RVer. So we're going to have a great conversation today about really how less can be more. So Amy, thanks a lot for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation. And like you said, so great to meet another fellow RVer who's understanding and embracing this different way of living.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So before we get started in our conversation, though, just tell my listeners a little bit about, who Amy is today.
Yeah, so who Amy is, that's a broad and general question. I'll start with that job title you just shared. I do work at the Institute for Social and Emotional Intelligence, where we lead and train coaches to help others increase their emotional intelligence. And such a life passion of mine. It's really about how to be a better human being. So really great to have something I call a job that aligns with values and personal choices that I make and how to live my life. It's great when your career lines up with that. So a lot of what we do in class is teach people to become more self-aware and then more aware of others, and then make choices in connection to that. And so closely tied into this lifestyle that both you and I have chosen to start living is, learning about our values and then picking a lifestyle that is well aligned in that way. I grew up in Ohio, moved out to Colorado, spent about 20 years there raising 3 children who are now all on their own, adulting quite well, decently at least. They're adulting as best as they can. And once the youngest was off to, start her own life as an adult, we decided to buy an RV and sell everything and start pursuing some of our own personal values. And that's what's landed us here.
Yeah, I love it. And again, I love being able to connect with people that are, doing the same lifestyle. I mean, we just came from a volunteer project out in Wisconsin. So we were, surrounded by a group of people who were all, doing the same thing that we're doing. And I think a lot of times, people misunderstand what we're doing. So it's great to be able to connect with someone who's like-minded. And, the topic of this conversation, and I know when we were talking about putting the podcast together, there were so many different things we could talk about, and we decided to land on, kind of less is more. And, here I sit in Michigan in a Class C RV, with everything I own, right here in the Aldi parking lot that I'm sitting in right now to do this podcast. And you're sitting in Cape Cod in the same thing with everything you own right there. So, tell me a little bit about how, your RV journey started and how, you came to appreciate that less in life really is more.
Yeah. Mine started probably 10, 15 years back. I remember the specific moment. I was living in a particularly large home at the time. I don't know, 5 bedrooms and 3-car garage. And I was divorced, so it was myself and my 3 younger kids at the time. And I was in the kitchen, like cleaning up and looking at them, and they all were sitting on this tiny little couch in the room that was just off the kitchen, doing their homework and laughing. And I looked around and I thought, I have this huge, big house, and every night we're like in the kitchen and then in that little room off the kitchen. And that's pretty much, and then we go and sleep in our beds, but half the time the kids would end up in my bed, get up in the night and come join me. So I thought, what are we doing? Like, I'm paying a lot of money for this large house. It's a lot of cleaning. It's a lot of maintenance, and realize that so many of my current worries were around that house. And I like big houses. I like nice things, but so much of the worry that was going on in my head was, can I afford the rent next month? And how am I going to get the driveway shoveled out from the snow? And just so much worry was attached to that big house. And in that moment, thought, what are we doing? Why do we somewhere we had learned that we need this big place. Somewhere at one point we probably got value from living in that big place. But at this point in our life, I realized we could probably go a lot smaller. And that kind of began a process. We moved, sold that house, and moved into a smaller place. And with each move, just kind of literally like physical space got smaller and smaller. And oddly, our happiness levels didn't plummet like you would think. Somehow we still enjoyed our lives. We actually found we had more and more time to do some of the things we really enjoy because we didn't have this big house and property to take care of. So, long story short, we'd moved a few times with the kids, and then once the kids were on their own, I moved into a small little two-bedroom apartment, got down to a one-bedroom apartment, ended up in a little cottage, like a back house, and never was happier. So kind of mine wasn't like, oh, I planned to downsize and live in a small house, but just in the process of doing so, found that the size of the house wasn't equal to the size of my joy.
Yeah.
So kind of a learning process to land here.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. So then what was it that, as you kind of continued this, journey of, downsizing, and I guess with each time you downsize, you were getting rid of other material things with each one of those
Yeah.
moves until you finally said, I'm done with it all and going to pack it
Yeah.
into, again, we're in a class C. And if I recall from our original conversation, you guys are in a class C as well, which is,
We
again,
are. Yep.
rare for full timers. Normally they're in a, big fifth wheel or something, or
Yeah.
class A. We're a little different, being in a class C. So what was it that finally took you over the edge and said, all right, I'm done with all of it? And,
Yeah.
you know, your original concept was
Make
kind of
that leap.
traveling the coasts, and that changed a little bit. But what was it that, made you, like you said, make that leap?
Yeah, and I think more than just a final, like, here's what happened, for me, it was a process of I don't know if you've ever lived in a big house with a lot of bedrooms. When it's time to move, it is a lot of work. And I remember that first big move from that house we had. I had like every friend I could think of bring their cars. I took two of the largest size rental trucks to haul stuff. We had to make two trips. All of my friends probably took at least two or three trips with their own cars and pickup trucks. And I just thought, this is nuts. Like it was so much work to move. And so with each move, we got rid of more. And I found the move was a little easier, and the lightness that you feel when you have less stuff started to kick in. So for me, literally, it was in the beginning like it is a pain to move this much stuff. And I would, people are pulling your boxes out of the closets, and I'm like, I don't even know what's in those things. It gets to be you have so much stuff that you don't even know what's in there. So how is that stuff bringing you value when you don't even know what it is? So for me, it was a more of I'm sick and tired of hauling around all these things that I don't even know if they're bringing me value because I don't even know what's in half the boxes. So when I finally had downsized, more and more and more, I really stopped to think, what is it that's important to me? What is it that I value? And at one time, I did value having a nice big home. And something I kind of want to make sure we talk about here is just because what I value, which right now is living small, is important to me, doesn't mean it needs to be important to you and everyone else out there. For me and my values of having less to free up more time to have the experiences that I want, that's moved to the highest of my values. I got to the point where I realized I was working as much as I could to save up money so I could take that one vacation a year. And I thought, wait, if I value, being in beautiful new places along the coastline, being at the ocean, having time to be out, in new places, why am I working all year just to have that one week or those 2 weeks? Is there a way that I could create a lifestyle where I don't have to wait for vacation to to exercise that high value of mine is to be somewhere beautiful, a new place of our country. So realize, oh my goodness, if we were to really downsize and then move into a home that has wheels that moves around, what if that would free me up by getting rid of all the rest of the stuff, that last few stuff I was hanging on to? If I could get rid of that all, that would free me up to get to enjoy this thing that's kind of moved to the top of my list of values. I really value seeing new places, and there's so many parts of this country I've never seen, and realize, how can I make that happen? I had to get rid of stuff to make that more of a reality. So for me, again, I keep talking about these values, but I think it really comes down to realizing, what is it you want in life? What's important to you? And obviously those shift over the years. There was a time when I wanted that big house. Realized that that big house wasn't serving me and wasn't really serving others in the same way that it had once. So values were shifting. When my kids were little, a high value was spending quality time with them. And I realized I could do that in a big house or a small house. As they moved on to start their own lives, I realized the value of mine was to see new places, see parts of this beautiful country that I haven't got to visit yet. So, what do I need to get rid of to make that happen? So, for me, again, it's that constant prioritizing of what's important. Right now, it's important to see this country. So, living in an RV is one way of doing that, and a way that's working for us. How about you? What caused you to have that final, here, I want to live this lifestyle? Do you remember what it
Um,
was?
Honestly, I never anticipated doing this. I
Yeah.
worked for a youth nonprofit organization I founded a youth nonprofit organization, which I was then the executive director of, and, loved every second of what I was doing. And
Mm,
my mom was actually, um, she kind of, I guess, started the wheels in motion many, many years ago. She took an old
yeah.
1967 Plymouth Valiant, took the back seat out of it, and just traveled the country. And I always admired her, what she did, and I always loved telling her story. But at no point in my life did I ever think that her story would be my story. And
Right.
then in early 2019, I took two trips. One, I drove from Pennsylvania to Dallas, Texas, and then came back through Louisiana and back to Pennsylvania. Um, and the other one was from Pennsylvania to Orlando, Florida, where I drove by myself. And it was really the first time in my life where I enjoyed the journey. Our
Mm,
organization, we did a lot of traveling, but we were always on a very regimented schedule. It was always, we have to be, you know, at the old country buffet by 8 o'clock so that all the kids could, get in and have breakfast before we go on to our, the baseball tournament that we were traveling to.
right. Yeah.
So I never had an opportunity to enjoy the journey. And one of the things that my mom did, when she traveled is, she avoided interstate highways like the plague. She was always off on some secondary highway. I was between
Mm-hmm.
my junior and senior year of high school, I had the opportunity to go down the East Coast with her. And, we were never on I-95. We were on, some back road, checking out the scenery, enjoying our time. And those trips, it was the first time in my life where I enjoyed the journey. And when I
Yeah.
got when
Yeah.
I got home, I wrote like I hadn't written before. I'd already, released a book in 2012, and I was working on adding 10 chapters to it. But the amount of time I was putting in with the organization, I just couldn't find the time to write. So with this new inspiration to write, um, it almost felt as a calling, as though, God was saying to me, it's time to, start a new chapter of your life. You did everything you can do
Yeah.
here. It's time to move on. And I didn't embrace it at first, but over time, understanding the inspiration I got, being able to write more is really what put me over the edge. And so I ran it by my wife, and at first she thought I had lost my mind. She wanted no parts of it. um, and slowly, she was in a process where she had just been downsized from um, her job that she had worked for 23 years in the oil and gas industry, and was working
Mm-hmm.
as a employee for another oil and gas company. And the doors of her becoming a permanent employee continued to not open, even though that's what she was told when she was hired. This
Mm,
would be temp to permanent, temp to permanent. And after a while, she just got frustrated with that, and again, kind of took it as a sign of, you know what? Yeah, maybe it's time for a new chapter. Maybe it's time to move on. And just like you, we lived in a 3,500 square foot house on,
yeah.
2 acres of property, and we loved our house. We loved that, that big house. But it just got to a point where it's like, you know what, maybe this is the new chapter for us. And
Yeah. Yeah.
as we were downsizing, like you said, like there's so much stuff that we hadn't used um, in such a long time. It's like, why did we even
Mm-hmm.
do this anymore? And it really felt, almost liberating to get rid of it. And
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I said, it's all about the experience. It's all about the experience. And you know, we've only, we've been doing a little over 2 years, and we've only scratched the surface of what there is to see in this amazing country. And you're in the same boat, I know. And but those experiences are just, you know, they last a lifetime. I mean, you're
Yeah.
you're never going to take all that crap that you accumulate. You're not taking it with you anyway. Um, but those memories, they really never fade. I mean, just a quick story. We were coming across the Upper Peninsula of Michigan the other day, and we'd stopped at a rest area, and um, there was a woman there, and she had a bike, and I was going out to look at the lookout, and I just happened to say to her, how many miles did you ride today? And she's like, well, I'm going to be riding 55. And I'm like, wow, that's a long bike ride.
What?
And she goes, I'm
Yeah.
actually riding my bike across the country, from Washington State to Delaware, to raise money for children of fallen special ops soldiers. And I was like,
Wow.
wow, that is so cool. And then we just had this incredible conversation for, only about 5 minutes. But again, that's not something that would have happened had we're not, living in an RV and just, by chance
No.
pull into the same rest area that this woman happens to be in. And, in the process, she's going to be breaking the world record for the oldest female to ride her bike across the country at the age of 67. So it was like just such a cool experience. And again, something I'll never, ever forget. I mean, I'll probably never see that woman again. But it was just an awesome experience. And I think that's what,
Yeah.
you know, that's what I've prioritized now is really the experiences and just, being able to look across Lake Michigan and see the vastness of it and that sort of thing is really
Yeah.
um, what this lifestyle is all about is just collecting those experiences.
Yeah, I'm hearing so much emotional intelligence in that. One competency of emotional intelligence is integrity, and one definition of integrity is when your day-to-day lifestyle matches up to your values and what you prioritize. And to me, in your story, I hear so much of, you listened. You listened to you mentioned God. Where do we hear these voices telling us maybe something's off? This isn't aligning with me, or maybe it's not bringing the joy that we want. Stress can be a big way of saying, hey, something's off here. This isn't working. I love to hear that you listen to those voices and then responded. I think so many times we get kind of stuck thinking, oh, I'm miserable, or I don't like my job, or I don't like where we live, or, fill in the blank. We get that stuck feeling. And as if we can't do anything about it. And for you to listen to, what the way we're living, maybe isn't in alignment with what we want right now. We want more experiences. What a great clarity of what's important to you. And how do I make that happen? And being willing to make the changes. A lot of us, that fear can kick in, that fear of the unknown, I think is one of the greatest fears out there. To hear that you're brave enough to kind of push past those fears, and your wife jumping on board and pushing past these things we've been taught, like we need the big house with the white picket fence and two SUVs and the security and the garage full of extra everything that we ever might need if we ever needed something. And it takes a little bit of bravery to let go of that and step into a lifestyle that supports you living out your values. I mean, that is integrity. Your day to day is matching up with what's important to you right now. And so well done on that. Kudos. It's great to hear someone living out integrity in that way.
Yeah, thank you. And I tell people all the time, I said, one thing I want to make clear is that I wasn't in like a dead end, I hate my job sort of
Yeah,
job. Like I
yeah,
was doing stuff that I really loved. We were helping kids and um, so it was tough at first, but now that we've been able to travel, I've been able to reconnect with a lot of my former players that I'd coached and stuff that are literally scattered all over the country,
Yeah.
so to get
Yeah.
together with one of
Huh.
my old players in Arizona or Florida
Yeah.
or Georgia or whatever the case is, and see what they're doing now, and being able to kind of see the seeds that I had planted many years ago now blossoming
Mm-hmm.
into these incredible young men and women. That's been kind of the affirmation that, what, this was the right decision. Your time
Yeah.
there was done, and now there's
Yep.
more to do here. So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. And
it's
to
been
think that
great.
you didn't discover this lifestyle though by staying put. You're on a trip with your mom. You're out there trying it out, not exactly sure where you want to end up, but get taking those experiences, I think, is the way to explore this. When we feel and like you said, you didn't feel stuck, you didn't feel like you weren't frustrated, but so many people get to those places where something's off and they don't know what to do. I think what you do, you just go. You take a trip, you try something out, and on that process you start to learn little pieces of, ooh, I like this, or that doesn't work for me, but this does. And through those new experiences, you start to form your path. But it doesn't happen when we're sitting still. I mean, not to use a RV pun, but you literally have to get behind the wheel and move the vehicle to find out what's next. And so many people have a lot of fear around doing that.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's amazing, just everything we experience, and those are things that we'll take to our grave, and
Yeah, yeah,
it's amazing. But I do think that first step is the key. Just saying, all right, let's do it. Because we do get caught up. We get caught up in all of these things that society tells us. Again,
yeah,
like you
yeah,
said, you have to have the big house, the white picket fence, the 2 cars, and all this stuff. But man, at the end of the day, none of that really matters other than what we're experiencing in life.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you and I have landed on that as one of our high values is new experiences. Something I've had to check myself on is just because this lifestyle works so well for us doesn't necessarily mean it's the best, like a stamp to put on everyone else. I have a friend who grew up not having much ever, rather poor, struggled her whole life, and she finally has the big house. And I realized I had to check myself with her because for her, a high value to her right now is to have a nice home that's secure. There's some financial stability there because she's never had that. So I've had to check myself because I'm just like, everyone needs to do this lifestyle. It's so freeing. And I've come upon a phrase I think I like better than downsizing is right sizing. And depending on our values and what's important to us right now, for some that might be upsizing a little bit. It might be finally having that security that you never had. For me, it meant downsizing, getting rid of stuff, getting rid of the things that were preventing me. And I think, like you, experiences have become more important to us than all that stuff in the garage and in the attic and in the basement and the spare bedroom. And we want experiences, but realizing for some, values are different. We all have differences in that. And I think in our world right now, it's especially important to remember that because we're getting kind of polarized. We kind of get thinking the way we do it is the way to do it. And so I've really tried to adjust my life. For me right now, yes, this is the way to live. But for others with different value, for example, maybe a value right now is being there for an elderly parent who's ill. If that's the case, traveling the country not going to work for them. But to be able to move and be with a parent, then that would be their highest value. So I've been trying to use that phrase right sizing versus downsizing. And then that way for each of us, as we evaluate what's important to us, we can right size, whatever it takes to create a life that allows us to live out that value. Does that resonate or make sense?
Really does. It really does, because I know, during my, youth coaching career, one of the things that would frustrate the daylights out of me was these coaches who would go in and think that there's a cookie cutter size
Yeah.
as to how to hit a baseball or throw a baseball or all this stuff, and they take that individuality out of the equation, which you cannot do. I mean, we're all human beings. We're all designed differently. So I love that. I love the right sizing. And like you said, the, right sizing for you and I right now is, collecting experiences and living in an RV and traveling across the country, but that might not be it for everyone. And I think that's where we get caught up. um, Society wants to create that cookie cutter approach. This is,
Yeah.
Society's definition of success is this. You have the big
Yeah.
house, you have the nice car, you have all of this stuff in the garage.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think if we get out of that cookie cutter approach, and like you said, we're living in a very polarized time where everybody thinks like it's my way or the highway sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that, embracing our individuality is something we need to do a lot more of. Some people like the color red, some people like the color blue. That's perfectly fine.
Right.
It's
Right.
just,
Yeah.
so I love that. I love that terminology of right sizing. Because again, it might not be the right lifestyle for where somebody's at in their current state.
Yeah, yeah. I still believe with the less is more though, and what I mean by that, not just not it doesn't just have to be stuff. For example, if my work was all important right now and that's all I wanted to focus on, I still need to say no to some things to have more of that thing that I want. So I would, if that was my priority, I'd say need to say no to more leisurely activities so I can really pour into my work. So that concept of less is more, I think, is still very applicable. Decide what you want, decide what's important, and then we all have clutter. I mean, pick up your phone and start scrolling, and it's clutter, 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 clutter. You get online to look up and research something, and you end up down a rabbit trail of clutter. We have so much bombarding us all the time. So I think as we lay out what's important to us and what our values are, it's still really important to think of that less is more. What do I need to have less of to have more of what I really want? If I want more time with my kids, what do I need to do less of to have more time for my kids? If I want a bigger house and more nice things in my house, what do I need to do less of to have more of that thing I want? So that concept of less is more, I think, is so important because I just think life throws a lot of clutter at us. And unless we decide and prioritize what's important, we're just going to be, we get bombarded with so much coming in that it's hard to stay clear on what do I want. So we do have to figure out what to have less of. For me and you moving into an RV, that literally meant I need less shoes. I need less sweaters. I need less kitchen utensils in the drawer. So for me, that meant physical stuff. Have less of that stuff so I can be free to travel and live in an RV. So I think as people prioritize what's important, that's a good check to still do. Okay, if this is really what I want, what things do I need to get rid of? And it might not be literal physical things. It might mean, stop spending my time, wasting time watching TV or whatever that is. Does that resonate at all? That concept of less is more?
Yeah, it really does. And again, I think it's a constant daily inventory of
Yeah.
that sort of thing, and it
I was going
even,
to ask you how often. So daily, you think? Tell me more on that.
yeah, because I think even with myself, with um, you know, podcasting and writing, like I've got to check, okay, to get more writing done, what do I need to do less
Yeah.
of?
Yep.
I got into, we were stationary for most of this past summer in Pennsylvania, and I really dug into my podcasting, and I got to a point where I was doing multiple interviews a day, which was great, but then I wasn't writing hardly at all. So I had to kind of go back and check that balance again and say, okay,
Yeah.
I they're both important to me. They're both important to what I want to get out there into the world. But I can't just dive into one and neglect the other. So
Right.
yeah, I
Right.
think it really is kind of a daily task of taking that inventory of what needs to stay and what needs to go. And
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes it is okay to just sit on the couch and do nothing. Or
I-
sit in the
yes,
lawn.
because
For
that's
us, it's
yes.
probably better in the lawn chair outside
Yeah,
than
no.
do nothing and
My
just
swinging lawn
relax.
chairs.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, my very best RV purchase we've made are two chairs that hang from it's a hitch that goes into the back of the truck. with a hanging like for a hammock, but we have swinging chairs. That's um, that's probably my number one thing that I own right now are those swinging chairs.
um, and just like, we like to walk the dog and hike a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah,
And, so we have to make sure we're,
yeah,
carving out the time to do that. And even on a travel day, um, we stopped at a little rest area on the way down here. And, my wife took the dog for just a little, quarter mile, half mile walk. And it was the weather wasn't great, but
yeah.
it was still, what we carved out to make sure that got done, with a heavy
Yeah,
travel
yeah.
day.
Yeah, prioritizing for the day. What are your values? We need to get out and stretch our legs. We need take a little break. I love your thought of doing it daily. What are and values? I don't think should be static. I mean, like I mentioned, when I was raising small children, my values were different then than they are now that my kids are off on their own. So allowing our values to shift. And I love the thought of even daily, like today, what is most important? Kind of laying that out. What things do I really want to get to today? Do I need to get to? And then what do I need to do less of to make that happen? How do we free up that space to reach those daily goals or values?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that is so important. And it's one of the things, I'm a big proponent, when you talk about, our values being static and stuff like that. Like, it drives me crazy, again, this model that society has created for a young kid to jump from high school right into a 4-year college
Yeah.
and, accumulate a massive amount of debt, which
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
them right on the path of now constantly fighting to, you know, pay off that debt and then figure out how to also get the big house and the car and all that other stuff. Where I think, you know, maybe the best route would be take a year off between high school and college and
Yeah.
kind of figure out what
Yeah.
to do and digest it all. Because I don't know that we all knew what we wanted to do for the next 40 years of our life when we were 18 years old. I know I didn't.
I don't even know when we hit 40 if we know what we want to do for the last 40 years of it's and again it remind you kind of jump behind the wheel and start driving. Like sometimes you don't know, but you got to get out there and experience to find out what does work and what doesn't. Someone asked me like, how do you know what your values are? How do you know what is important? And someone told me this once. I thought it was a great way to check. They said, look into your bank account and see what you're spending your money on. And because we usually put our money into things that we value. Um, and vice versa, list out the things that you feel are important and then see if that's where your money's going. And then the second one was time. Check your calendar. Like what am I doing in my day to day? And a lot of times when we get that frustrated feeling or we just feel like we're living like not in alignment, it's because we're spending our money on the things that aren't values to us, and we're spending our time doing things that aren't values. So kind of two ways to check, kind of a cross check there, what's important to me. I can tell you now, if I look into my bank account, I am spending money on RV life and travel, but that feels good. That's an alignment, and the time, our calendar again matches up. And I think that's part of why we're feeling such a sense of peace and contentment right now, because the things that are important to us are where we're putting our time and money.
Yeah. No, and I love that. And I like what you said about, even at 40, we don't necessarily know what we want to do. And I think that's one thing that, I always try to stress to people now is that it's never too late to make that change. And again,
Yeah.
using an example of my mother, after she stopped, traveling full time for a while, she actually went back to school in her late 40s
Mm-hmm.
to drug and alcohol therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, she had been out of school for 20 plus years at that point, and she decided, okay, it's time to shift. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to help the world. So it's never
Yeah.
too
Yeah.
late to make that change. Like you said, you just have to have the guts to face that fear and overcome that fear, and like you said, get behind the wheel and say, okay, we're making the change and this is the direction I'm going to go now. And that is tough because you get into that comfort zone and
Yeah.
have to break
Yeah.
through it.
It's funny how like everything else in our life is in constant change, just, we physical bodies, trust me, I'm getting old and the body changes, our bodies change, our relationships change, our relationship with our kids change, seasons change. I mean, it's fall here where I am and the leaves are turning colors and everything else in life is in a constant state of change. Yet we get this mindset like we got to have the big house, we got to, have the career that stays the same forever and I don't know where all these thoughts originate, but we get stuck. So I love the thought of staying open to change and maybe even staying on the lookout for it, keeping an eye out, here's the way I'm doing things, but what if, dream a little of what if I were to make a shift in here, what might happen? And feeling okay with that. For somewhere we've gotten our security from things, from stuff, from sameness. And I think there's something in us all that may just have a little ounce of adventure of wondering what if and allowing ourselves to do more of that. I would love to see how much contentment comes from if people could step out of these comfort zones and try a little more.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the
There,
RV lifestyle kind of forces that. We love that we've gotten so comfortable. We show up to a new place, new state, and we're like, okay, here's home. And in the beginning, we were a little nervous with the moves and like, where are we now? And what's this town we're in? And we're just getting to where like, ooh, we're in a new town. Let's go see what's here. Let's go see what the coastline looks like. And it feels good getting comfortable with the constant change.
yeah.
Can you relate to that?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because, I've been very introverted my entire life. And
Mm,
one thing I've found is that the RV life has gotten me to step outside of that. And, I was telling you a story about the woman on the bike, like that, that was not me, even 3 years ago. Like I would have just walked past, probably would have
yeah.
waved and smiled and then just went and did my own thing. But to actually, you know, me start that conversation was so not me in the past.
Mm,
And, I found myself doing that a lot more because, again, there's just, something about this lifestyle that
yeah.
allows you to kind of break free of some of that stuff.
Yeah, I think you're stretching yourself a little bit out of that comfort zone, and we all are learning more and more about that. The more we step out of our comfort zone, the more there's room to grow. And I don't want to be the same person I am today in 40 years. I hope in 40 years I look back and think, who was that woman then? I want to grow. I want to change. I want to become my best self. And I think sometimes it takes like you stretch out of that comfort zone a bit.
Yeah. And we were
Yeah.
just there was a butterfly garden near the campground we were staying at during this volunteer project back in Wisconsin, and there was a sign there that I think is very relevant to what we're talking about. It said, if nothing ever changed, we wouldn't have butterflies.
Mm,
And like,
yeah, that's perfect.
yeah, how perfect is that
Yeah.
to what we're
Yeah.
talking about right now? You got to
Yeah.
go through that uncomfortable being of, converting from the caterpillar to the butterfly.
Yeah, yeah, and it is uncomfortable. I love that you point that out. I remember when I was downsizing, I had this hope chest, this cedar hope chest that had been gifted to me, and I for some reason, put a lot of value onto this hope chest, and it's so heavy and so hard to move, and we hardly were using it. And I remember it was a painful process to let go of that. I sold it. You always sell things for way less than the value that you put on them, and but such a painful process to let it go. But I tell you, as soon as it was gone, it was gone. It's it was gone. Like I literally didn't think about it again until later when then it was the piano. I had this piano that I loved and I love my piano and how could I ever live without my piano? And painful process to go through letting go. But then as soon as it was gone, you know what? We didn't have to move a piano and there's pianos to be played. You can get keyboards. There's options. So the process of letting go, of making space for the things we want I don't want to act like it's easy. I remember my very last yard sale I had with the remaining items that I had left to my name. And this is actually after, having this 5-bedroom home. I'm down to a little one room cottage. Still had a whole yard sale worth of stuff to get rid of. And it's painful. It's like those are my things. These are some of them are things I've carried around with me since a child, scrapbooks and things like that, diaries and why am I holding all this stuff? It's such a burden to carry. but very painful still to let it go. But oh my, I mean, literally, like the moment you see someone else scooping up the stuff, you're selling it and loading their truck up and they're off, it's like, oh, okay, it's gone. And it surprised me how little I've looked back on the stuff, thinking, oh, I can tell you, I never have looked back and thought, oh, I miss my hope chest. Like not once. I've got another thing I can put things in to store it in. So it's a painful process. These changes we go through. The butterfly is probably a great example. I don't know how to measure their pain, but I'm sure there's some pain involved in that transformation. So it's not easy, but the lightness you feel once you go through that sometimes painful process of change, coming out on the other side, you only know what it's like when you give it a try. So
Right. No doubt. Well, we're just about out of time, but is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to talk about before we sign off here and get to my
I
final
think we've
question?
we've covered it all. One thing I think that's really come clear for me in our conversation, I see you doing it, and I'm learning how to do this with this new lifestyle. It's just what we're talking about is living a life that is in alignment with our values, feels right. So I guess if anything to leave with any of our listeners today, just encourage you to find out what your values are, what's important to you. And no shame around that. Your values could be so different than mine. And that's kind of what makes this world such a beautiful place, that we're not all the same. So figure out your values and then figure out what you need to let go of, what you need to do less of to make those values a part of your day-to-day life. And it's not going to be overnight. I mean, for you, I know it took a while. Same for me. It's not like we just like, I'm going to move in an RV, and it takes a while, and it's a process, and allow yourself to work through that sometimes painful process of what do I need to let go to have less of that, to have more of this. Truly back to that less is more.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Then, Amy, if anybody wants to reach out to you to
Yeah.
find out more, we didn't really talk a whole lot about what you do professionally, but I think
Yeah.
all of what we talked about relates back to what you do professionally with the Institute of Emotional Intelligence. But if anybody wants to reach out to you and connect, how could they do that?
Yeah, email me. I'll just say it here. It's Amy, AMY, at ISEI.com, Institute for Social Emotional Intelligence. You can visit our website, and we teach classes in how to have more emotional intelligence, more things like integrity, living out a life that's aligned with values. And then we teach people how to train it and to go and help others do the same. So yes, reach out by email and visit our website. Our phone number's on there as well. So LinkedIn,
Awesome.
I'm on LinkedIn as Amy Burnett Sargent, Amy Burnett Sargent-Kossoff. So you can find me on there as well.
All right. Awesome. So that brings me to my final question. And the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the
Mm,
opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. So what's
love it.
one of the little things that Amy does to make the world a little bit better place?
Little thing. It's kind of a big thing to me. And it's exactly what we've been talking about. Live a life in alignment with your values. I'm doing that now. And I think when we pour ourselves into something we're passionate about, that's what truly makes the world a better place. And what you're passionate about isn't going to be exactly mine, and that's okay. You're doing something that you're passionate about, and I'm doing something that I'm passionate about. And I think the more that we all can do that, I don't know about you, but it's easy to do the things that I'm passionate about. And it's infectious. People see you doing that and they want more of that. The contentment that can come from living a life in alignment like that. So for me right now, it is living a life in an RV, traveling the country and sharing those pictures and those experiences with others.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it. Amy, I really love this conversation. We probably could have went on for a much longer period of time, but
Next
um,
time,
yeah,
part
it was
two.
great. Yeah, and I think
Thank you.
I think there will be probably a part two to this
Mhm. Yeah,
podcast
we
for
we
sure.
need to check in like in 10 years. We're still in our RVs. How's it going? We need some follow up on this. So thank you for your time today.
You bet. And for those out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com or danclouser.com. And while you're there, pick up a copy of one of my books, Beauty of a Diamond Through the Eyes of a Coach, or The Journey of My Mother's Son, Volume 1. Amy, again, thank you so much for taking the time. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Dan.
You bet.